Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the It's the Pictures podcast. I'm your host, Max Colville. This is episode 151. We just celebrated our 150th episode. If you missed that one, we talked about a bunch of things about Disney that we loved and celebrate Disney 100 this year. And that was quite fun. And on the newsletter, I followed it up with a more in-depth post about some of my favorite Disney songs if you want to check that out. But John isn't here today. He had other arrangements and they had to get to, which gave me an opportunity to find a guest for this episode. And I'm so happy to introduce my guest today. It's Megan Kearns. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Max. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Megan and I go way back. She's part of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And I always wanted to have her on the show, so I'm glad that she was able to make time now. Megan, can you tell a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So as you said, yes, I'm in BOFCA, the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I podcast every week. I'm a co-host of Spoilerpiece Theater, and I also write film reviews for Edge Media Network. So yeah, that's my spiel.
Wonderful. Yeah. I'm also a big fan of Spoilerpiece, and we've had Evan Crean on the show before, and yeah, we love your show over there.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah. It's something that I listen to after I've seen the movie.
Yes, I know. Some people listen before, but I have heard plenty of people who say they listen afterwards. So yeah, definitely can do it either way.
Right. But this week we have some topics to talk about, including our big feature. We're going to talk about the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, including their appearances in Infinity War Endgame and their little holiday special there. Obviously, it's not just the trilogy of films that James Gunn did. And yeah, well, I know John and I were talking about it. Megan, we did our annual summer movie contest, and John picked that as his number one box office grosser this summer. Like he thought like that was going to be the biggest grosser, and I don't know, it's not looking like it's going to be the summer champion.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely think it is whatever it ends up being as far as its profits in the end. I have to say, I think it's my favorite mainstream blockbuster of the summer. So,
ooh, thus far, right? We're still early, but
we are still very, very early. I was like, summer hasn't even actually officially launched yet. So yes.
Right. Yeah, we'll get into some of those movies and more a little bit later. No, I have not seen Fast X or Fast 10 yet, as whatever you want to call it. Those weird titles. I wonder if that's like they're direct from Vin Diesel's mind, or if like he like talks to somebody and like, how can we make it like even weirder this time?
Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but I had read something that it has to do with copyright. So because of the copyright, they keep changing the titles. Don't know if that's true or not. So I could be spreading misinformation.
Yeah, and I was sharing with Shannon like a joke that I had seen a while ago, and I was like, oh, they should have like called this one like Fast 10 Your Seatbelts or
Yes,
something.
I saw someone tweet that like 2 years ago, and I was like, yes. Why did they not call it that? Missed opportunity. So
yeah, that would have been the best. But yeah, so let's get into some news and stuff. I thought it would be fun, Megan, and we haven't traditionally done this with guests, but because we did our Disney 100 episode, and maybe just for this year going forward, we'll do this. I just want to get a flavor of like what you like about Disney animated films. Like, what are your three favorites?
Oh my God. So I love Disney animated films. I have been watching them my entire life, and I go to Disney World whenever I can. So I'm a huge Disney fan. So narrowing it down to 3 was nigh impossible. I did pick 3 though, and then I had like 6 runners up.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
Because they're so good. They're so good. And favorites for me tend to change depending on the day and the week and my mood. So, but as it stands right now, my 3 favorites, are Frozen, The Little Mermaid, and Beauty and the Beast. And then I also absolutely adore Sleeping Beauty, Tangled, Encanto, Lilo and Stitch, Hercules, and Aladdin.
Oh, that's fun. I see that. Yeah, you can tell. Like, I hate to like think about like what people associate with, but I see that because right, like I told John, like since I identify as a cis white male, that I really enjoyed these like male centric films, right? Like Aladdin
Ooh.
and Jungle Book.
Mm-hmm.
Those were my favorites growing up, and I can definitely see like from your standpoint, maybe like that's why you really enjoy like Frozen and um more of these empowering stories for women, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely, I don't think that always necessarily, translates a 1-to-1 ratio, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, definitely. I was as a kid, and I very much am now always looking for inclusive stories and diverse stories and, stories about different protagonists and particularly women and girls. So yeah, those are the stories that definitely resonated with me when I was a kid. And Frozen particularly I love, and I've rewatched it multiple times, and I still love Let It Go. I never get tired of that, surprisingly. But yeah, I love that because I love that it's such a powerful love story between sisters, and I think that that's unique, and that's because, not that there's anything wrong with romantic love, of course, but we see so much heteronormative romantic love throughout a lot of children's films, and so it's nice to see love focusing on sisters. And yes, and also, of course, I think it's kind of funny, and I did not plan this, but I think it's very funny that both Frozen and Little Mermaid very much have queer themes and queer undertones in them, and very much queer coding, because as a queer woman it kind of makes sense that that's what also would stick with me.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. Like we were watching with my daughter. We were watching um Cinderella for a while. We went on to like the Cinderella like direct to video movies,
Hmm.
and that was fine. And I was like, if you can watch these, then maybe we could do Snow White. So we watched Snow White recently, and this afternoon she was watching it, and like she's like, why are the dwarfs sad? And like she'd watched it once before. She's like, don't they
Hmm.
know like she'll wake up again? I'm like, yeah, we know that because we've seen it, but like they don't know that. And then she's like, she just rewound it before like the prince came to find Snow White, and I was like, okay. I was like, we could do that. She just really likes it when Snow White finds their house and the animals and the dwarfs coming home from work and finding
Hmm.
her. I'm like, oh yeah, watching it for the first time in a while. I was like, oh, this movie is like 5 minutes really scary, like Huntsman's gonna kill Snow White, and then it's like
Right.
an hour of like dwarf shenanigans, and then it's
That's
like ten
true.
it's like 10 minutes of like, oh, here's a poison apple and you're dead. So
No, that is very true. And I agree with your daughter. I think those are the best parts of Snow White too. I think those are the best parts of Cinderella too, like when she's hanging out with the animals.
yeah. Yeah, she's been digging those, and so yeah, I've been watching a lot of Disney
Nice.
animated movies, and yeah, I think they're great, and thank you for sharing yours.
Oh gosh, of course. I mean, honestly, I could have gone on and on talking about it because I do. I adore Disney movies so much. They're just so good.
So John and I used to like cover the Cannes Film Festival like in depth, and we used to do like these huge previews, Megan, where
Hmm.
we'd like go through the films and we talk about the directors and like the actors and what the movies were about. And I think we did that mostly for us and our excitement towards the festival, because as I guess as we've gotten older, but as we've been doing this for more years, we realize, oh yeah, well, not only us, but a lot of people won't see these films for 6, 7 odd months
Hmm.
when they come out. So I was like, maybe we'll just look at the Cannes Film Festival um, more as like passive audience and like say like, oh, what's getting the biggest buzz from the festival, and like what can we add to our watch list to watch later, and maybe like talk about the awards ceremony and like the big winners from that. And that's what we take away now. um but the festival's been going on for a few days now, and there's some early rumblings from the corset, if you will, the runway there, and the new Todd Haynes movie, May December, with Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman seems to be like one of the big winners so far of like just getting a lot of buzz, and I'm really excited for that. I really enjoy Todd Haynes' work, so
Hmm.
I'm excited about seeing that. Some other things that have been like happening down there, like bigger players, like the Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny movie premiered, and unfortunately, it looks like critics weren't super hyped about it. It's doing poorly critically, and maybe um, the rollout should have been different, but maybe they just wanted to do it for Harrison Ford and company. Um, that's what the feeling I get now. And then, of course, Flowers of the Killing Moon, the new Martin Scorsese, also made its world premiere, and um, really looking forward to that. It seems like most people say it met expectations, which is which is about as high as praise as you can give that movie, because the expectations were probably full uh, towards the roof based on Scorsese's output. What have you I know that talking to you before the show that you looked into the Cannes Film Festival a little bit and what was going on over there.
Hmm.
Do you typically keep up with Cannes, or was this like a new project that I had you do?
No, I keep up with every film fest, whether I'm attending it, covering it, or not. And so I actually have some screeners from Cannes that I will be watching and covering. So I'm super pumped about that because it'll be my first time covering Cannes virtually. And yeah, so I have those films. And then I'm also equally ecstatic for Killers of the Flower Moon because Scorsese is an amazing filmmaker, of course, but also I adore Lily Gladstone. I love them in anything and everything. So I'm so excited that she is getting all of the adoration and accolades that she deserves. I too am excited for May December. I'm also excited for Jonathan Glazer's The Zone of Interest. Of course, Pedro Almodovar's Strange Way of Life because I want to see Pedro Pascal and Ethan Hawke in a queer cowboy love story. Like, yes, give it to me now. So yeah, and there are a bunch of others that I think look so fascinating, like Anatomy of a Fall and La Chimera and Four Daughters and Perfect Days and How to Have Sex and Cobweb. Like there's so many. Um, so yeah, so I have a list of about 20,
Wow.
22, 23. So yeah, so I will be keeping my eyes peeled for those.
Yeah, and it's weird because like sometimes these films get a lot of buzz and like internationally, but since like say people tuned in like me and you, we might anticipate these more than other people. But then like
Mhm.
when they're actually coming stateside, eventually, it's like they have such limited releases due to like whether it was the subject matter wasn't as uh I don't know, as profitable as it could be for these distributors, or
Mhm.
and it's just weird because it's like stuff that you really want to see. Like I guess I use my one of my favorite directors who has movies in the contest every year, and this year too is Corieta and his new film Monsters in the contest. But
Mhm.
he's had films almost every year already, and it's funny because he's not the type of director whose films are like, oh yeah, it's a new Corieta, you have to go see it. But like, he is so consistent, and just like I always look forward to his films. But his, I guess his movies maybe don't lend themselves to being these big uh, box office must see extravaganzas that some other things are. And I know it can be tough. Like even I know Megan, you probably saw a few years ago with Titan winning the
Oh,
Palme d'Or, and like that is
of
such a
course.
that's such a bizarre and fascinating movie.
Mhm.
Um, I guess
One I adore and love.
yeah, I guess one that Neon had to do their best to try to market, but even though you win the Palme d'Or, doesn't necessarily mean instant uh, success in that market, I guess.
Right, right, absolutely. I mean, it's hard because I think when you look and see what's at a lot of cinemas that are mainstream, it's not what's playing at film festivals, whether they are more small indie film festivals or the huge ones, like TIFF and Cannes and Sundance. So it really, I think there's this divide, and it makes me sad because I love all cinema and I love across genres, whether they're, giant tentpole blockbusters or they're really small, obscure indie films. I love them and I want everybody to have access to them and to see them. And that's just sadly not the case, but I wish it was. Of course, though, I wish we did not live in a capitalist society
Right.
where that's what is driving what movies get distributed and,
Yeah.
impacts what people see.
Commerce over art.
Right.
But sometimes you get those big weird anomalies like Everything Everywhere All at Once, where it was a great art film and then successful commercially.
Absolutely. But that one, I mean, I'm so surprised that was as huge as it was. Not that it resonated with people. That didn't surprise me. But it's such a weird genre film. I'm so pleasantly surprised that it just dominated box offices and made, so much money and so many people saw it. Like it's fantastic because you don't always see that. You don't always see the weird movies, get the eyes and the audience that they deserve.
Right. So yeah, we're gonna be still following the Cannes Film Festival from afar as more things come out. I think the Sam Levinson The Idol show came out today, which is the big controversy number. I didn't read too much into it. That's gonna be on HBO soon, and I guess we're still waiting for a few more world premieres. The new Pixar Elemental, I think, is going to be having a world premiere there.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know what you find. I mean, famously, like After Sun was not in competition last year, but everybody fell in love with that film, and
rightfully
it
so.
made it on a lot of critics' ballots at the end of the year, including mine. And
me too.
so you never know what gems you're going to find, even not in competition.
Exactly. That's why I like following film fests, even ones I'm not going to, for that exact reason. Because sometimes the films, that are the biggest buzzed films, they deserve that. But then you're right, like you said, some gems that you have to uncover yourself. And yeah, and I guess that's our job too, right?
Right.
To talk about them.
Yeah, like for instance, one that I haven't seen yet that's coming out. Like I guess like I've gotten emails about it. Megan, was this one called The Eight Mountains, and I think they
Mm-hmm.
played at Cannes last year or something, and I've just heard that it's a terrific movie, and I just haven't gotten around to a screener, but I'm looking forward to seeing it when it comes out.
We'll be covering it on Spoilerpiece, not the next episode, but the one after. So I'm very excited to see it.
Okay, and then I wanted to get to one more news item before we get into our feature, and that is, it seems that Disney and Hulu have followed the leads of Netflix and soon to be Max. HBO Max is turning to just Max tomorrow, or by the time you hear this podcast, it will be that. And they're removing some shows and movies from not only Disney Plus but Hulu, and they're not necessarily like Star Wars and Marvel. I mean, those are humongous movies. They're more underperforming shows or things that maybe didn't connect with such a large audience, but that they deserve a spot in streaming regardless. I think the big argument is, well, it's not costing these companies any more bandwidth, but on the other end, they think like, oh, if someone's turning in to even watch it once, it's like they have to pay residuals for that viewing or something like that, and it adds up. And for something that's underperforming, maybe they shouldn't keep it there. But the biggest names that really stood out to me were like stuff like Willow TV, which I reviewed for Pace Magazine, is being removed from Disney Plus, and I was like, oh, that show is pretty decent, and it's like you spent all this money, it's only been up there for 5 months. And outside of that, there was this movie called The Princess that played on Hulu, which I heard was pretty decent.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah. It's like Ever After meets The Raid. How can you go wrong with that? It's fantastic.
Yeah. And there was another one. I think it was like a reverse, like Romeo and Juliet, like Rosaline or something
Yep.
like that. So it's sad that these things are just getting pulled, and like because they made their debut on streaming, or like that's where their home is. They're gonna like disappear for a little while into the ether, and who knows whether or not they'll come back. And this idea was that when we went into a streaming age, like maybe things would never disappear, but
Hmm.
it's seeming like that is just a fallacy. And what do you think about this whole thing, Megan?
Yeah, so I'm kind of cynically chuckling because for years I've been curating my own, and I know you love physical media too, but
Yeah.
I've been curating my own physical media collection for that very reason, because I knew it was a matter of time that things would get pulled. And, there are certain streaming platforms, like I think of Criterion Channel, where they announce each month what is going to be leaving by the end of the month. And actually, HBO used to do that too. I don't know if they're going to be doing that going forward when they transition to just Max, but they used to do that too, where they would say what's leaving at the end of the month and gives you some time to watch, which is great. And I like that you have a heads up. But at the same time, my big problem is something like Willow, which, yeah, I have been wanting to see that, but I haven't had the opportunity to. So the fact that it's only been up there for a few months, I'm like, oh, I'll watch it later this summer. Not going to be able to now. That's a problem. And if you're going to pull it from your services, which I think is kind of absurd, at least make it available to purchase on, Blu-ray or DVD. And I think that's the big problem, is that there are so many movies and shows that you just cannot get anywhere. They're just not available at all. And so when these companies just pull them, that's just art you cannot access, you can't see. And that's my big problem. But yeah, I have never believed that it was going to be that streaming was going to be the savior of being the equalizer for all this access to all of these things. Like I don't know, maybe it's the cynic in me, but I was like, no, they're just going to pull them at some point, and sadly they are.
Right, and it's funny because I think like I saw some news rumblings at the beginning of the year from people who really love physical media, who are like these companies are realizing, oh, if we just have stuff streaming, we can't get people to pay for this stuff over and over again.
Hmm.
It's like it's just going to be there,
Yep.
and I guess like they have their subscriptions, but like as they add newer content and continue to make stuff, it's like people are still going to be able to access that stuff for like pennies, as opposed to like, oh, it's a new cycle, buy this movie for this like minor resolution upgrade.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because like how many copies of Lord of the Rings do I probably have, or like The Matrix, right? So just films that I've bought over and over again due to upgrades on physical media. And um I'm happy I have them. I mean, but there's this, on the other token, like people are like, you imagine, Megan, that there's people in this world who are like, they grew up on streaming already, and it's like
Right.
that they're like, oh well, what do you mean I can't have this anymore? And like they're like, what? There's like DVDs and Blu-rays, and like I have to get physical media to watch this old stuff, and
Right.
or
Yeah.
we were telling people like, oh, you should just buy The Office for $50 on Blu-ray, as opposed to paying NBC's Peacock all these months to access it, right? So
Well, it also presumes that you have the space to put it, and some people live in very small apartments, or small homes, and so you don't have a lot of space for it. So I know I'm talking about the importance of physical media, which I do believe very strongly, but also on the flip side, I'm like, ugh, but where are you going to put it all? And can you afford to have it all? So but yeah, so it would be lovely, it would be great if we didn't have to have physical media. But yeah, that's just unfortunately not the reality. So yes, if you love something and you can get it, get it.
right, and I mean, some of the limitations of physical media, people say like, "Oh, it doesn't last forever." But you know what? If a disc lasts for 50 to 75 years, and that's the entirety of my life, that's about what I care about. I don't care about like 200 years down the road if that disc is still gonna work. So
Yeah, I was like 50 to 75 years is pretty good.
yeah, I'd be pretty satisfied with that.
Yeah, yeah.
But now we're gonna go into our feature today, and that is the James Gunn directed movies of the Guardians of the Galaxy, the not so famous Marvel Comics superheroes who, after these movies came out, became top-ranked players in the Marvel Universe, thanks to the success of James Gunn's movies. But even when he started making this and developing it, it was a big risk for Marvel. I guess when I was doing my research, they said it was the 10th Marvel movie, and there was a lot of trades, like movie trades, entertainment trades, who were saying like, this is Marvel's biggest risk since Iron Man, and it's a movie about aliens, and people have to follow all these different planets and creatures that they've never seen before, and will it pay off? And now, all these years later, we can obviously see yes. Guardians of the Galaxy was probably one of the more successful, I guess, solo outings, if you will, of Marvel heroes. I think, like, overall, critically, and even audiences around the world really enjoyed the films, as opposed to like some of the franchises had dips and varying quality, but people really enjoyed the Guardians of the Galaxy, and they were certainly not Spider-Man or X-Men or any of those big name franchises, but Guardians of the Galaxy with Star-Lord and Drax and everybody, they certainly entertained audiences everywhere. Whereas James Gunn himself, he was really just known for Slither, which was like this like horror movie, like almost like comedy horror movie with Nathan Fillion. And if you don't know Nathan Fillion, he appears in almost everything James Gunn does, including the new Guardians movie, and he's had cameos in the other Guardians movies. He was in Firefly. He's great. I like him. And then he also did I never saw it, but I think it was like a superhero kind of like knockoff movie called Super. So maybe that was like his calling card. And until he picked up the Guardians and worked with them. So did you know of the Guardians of the Galaxy at all before you saw the first movie, Megan?
I didn't. And I have been reading comic books for a very long time. And yeah, no, I was not familiar with them till I saw the first film.
Yeah, it was the same thing with me. Like I knew Iron Man and Thor, and I mean, like, I was big into some of the franchises I've already mentioned, like Spider-Man and X-Men. I had those comics, and on the DC side, I was a big Batman fan. But yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy was not in my wheelhouse, so their story was pretty new to me, and it was funny. I guess Marvel launched Guardians on August 1st in the United States, and it's kind of funny, like, although we don't figure that August is like really the end of summer, right? It still feels like summer.
Mm-hmm.
The movie industry is like almost like shuts off at the end of July.
That's true.
It's like this year is July 21st is Barbie and Oppenheimer, and I think there's a few other movies opening after that, but like those will be like the movies that will like get you through August into September probably. And when I was doing my research, the only other movie to do big money in August was the first Suicide Squad. I guess DC opened that one, maybe hoping for the same result as Guardians, and it ended up making a lot of money for themselves too. But Guardians of the Galaxy 1, it had Chris Pratt in it, and Dave Bautista and Zoe Saldana, and then you had the voices of Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel, and it was a romping space adventure. And Megan, I've been talking so much. Can you please share some thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy 1?
Sure. Well, I was very pleasantly surprised when I saw it because I thought it was, very charming, a lot of fun, quirky, a little weird. I'm here for that. So yeah, I really liked it a lot. It's hard for me, it's hard for me to kind of separate out my feelings on the trilogy as a whole. But I have to say, going back and rewatching the whole trilogy gave me a new appreciation and a deeper appreciation for the first film. And I think it's it's very tight. I think it works really well. I think it vacillates quite effectively between humor and pathos, and I like the camaraderie and banter between all of the characters. And yeah, and I think what James Gunn does really, really well is showing small moments that aren't really small, these brief moments that really illuminate a character's personality and who they are. And I really appreciate that. And so I think they're a lot of fun, but I also think that there's a lot of emotional depth to them. And I really appreciate that. And I love that it's these, these misfits all coming together. They're all, cynical and disillusioned, and they become not just friends, but they become a family. And I think that's a really powerful message about found family. And it's nice to see, I think that superhero movies are often thought of as kind of fluff and just fun, which they certainly are and can be, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the stories that really move me are the ones that go a bit deeper, and I like that these films do that while still retaining their kind of zany, frenetic energy.
Right, and every like comic book hero has their own kind of I will use the frankness of a sad sap story, right? And certainly the Guardians all have their own very deep family drama. Instantly when the Guardians 1 starts, we meet young Star-Lord, and he is in a bad way. He's a young boy, and his mother has just passed away, and he gets like picked up by this like spaceship, and like instantly goes on a journey with what are known as Ravengers in the Guardians series, and he meets his surrogate father, Yondu, who's played by Michael Rooker, and he kind of makes a life of it, right? And when we first meet him, he is as the older character, he is enjoying his 80s tunes or 70s tunes. I forget which like each one of these movies decides to go with like a different era, I think, of music, and that's definitely something that I really love about the franchise as well, is its selection of music.
Excellent soundtracks.
And I guess the first film is really about not only the characters getting together, but coming in contact with Infinity Stone that would become like the focal point of the first Marvel era, if you will. These Infinity Stones, and yeah, it's funny though, because I'd put in here like, can you remember the villain? And obviously now I know that you've just recently watched it, so that's a poor question to ask you. But yes, Lee Pace plays like, I guess, like Ronan, and he's
Yes.
like this blue angry alien guy, and he's not a great villain. I guess. Like I think like maybe Benicio del Toro as the Collector has like more memorable.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
I remember Benicio del Toro. I did not remember Lee Pace at all in this movie. And for some reason I thought he was in the second one, and I did not I thought he was one of the Sovereign, the gold people. I was like, how did I completely forget Lee Pace when I saw him in the credits before I rewatched it? And then I watched, I'm like, oh right, this guy. And yeah, and I will say, I just said a few moments ago that I think that what James Gunn does is so good at showing these snippets of people's personalities. I do think that he got a lot better showcasing villains and their personalities and their kind of rationales than he did in this one, because yeah, I mean, clearly Ronan is very upset at and wants vengeance and wants to destroy the planet of Xandar, and he's making this deal with Thanos to do it, and then he wants to betray him. but we don't really get much in the way of not just backstory, but in the way of character development or learning much of anything about him. So I think that's why he is such a forgettable character.
Yeah, and
You know?
on that same side, we get a lot more on Karen Gillian's Nebula, who becomes
Yes.
a very important part of the Guardians series. And as far as a villain or a foil goes in this movie, she's much more memorable
Yes.
for what she accomplishes here.
Oh, absolutely. Both visually with, the great, bluish purple body paint and her prosthetics, as well as her, fury filled persona. So, no, I completely agree. She's a much more interesting foe in this film.
Yeah, and I think like so I already mentioned like Peter Quill, Star Lord. He has his own family trouble, but obviously, so Saldana's character, um, and Karen Gillian's characters both have a lot more family drama, and
Yes.
it's just something that goes through the series fully. Is there something that like you really love about Guardians 1 in particular?
I mean, I loved going back and watching kind of the inception of all of the relationships that you see unfold throughout the series. But one thing that well, there's two things. One, I really do appreciate and enjoy the evolving relationship between Nebula and Gamora, especially from the first film to the second film, um, because they're so contentious with each other in the first film, and you find out that both of them, hate Thanos. But in the second film, you find out more about their relationship with each other when they were kids and how they both were just kids trying to survive. And it's this heartbreaking thing. So I really love seeing, the beginnings of that in the first film and whatnot. And I also really love that you see the inception of this overarching theme across the trilogy that you really get to see come to fruition in the third film through Rocket's backstory. You see it in the first film too, this notion of cruelty and how abhorrent it is, clearly to James Gunn, but also to Peter Quill. And then it becomes something that each of the Guardians also abhor, that they're kind of, the underdogs, and they hate bullying essentially and cruelty. And I love that you can see those threads from the first film.
Right, and like each one of these characters has suffered not only some type of physical abuse, but also emotional abuse as well.
Oh,
So
totally.
they all have to overcome that, and that's like embedded into the story where like oh you're getting a lot of chuckles for sure, because that's how the film is made, and with Dax being a lot of the comic relief here.
Hmm.
But there's certainly a lot more underneath the shiny veneer of this film, and the guts and everything. And I think what I like about the Guardians films, and it's certainly not true for every Marvel film, but it's like maybe it feels like Marvel head producer Kevin Feige gave James Gunn some room to like do his own thing outside of the house style,
Hmm.
and that's why these films feel a little bit more exciting than some of the stuff that's coming out of the studio.
Oh, absolutely. They're visually different. They're tonally different. Yeah, they definitely feel different. Whereas I think many of the Marvel films kind of feel the same. And I know that that's very much intentional, so there's continuity. But these feel different in a really great way. From what James Gunn has said, these are the three films he wanted to make all along, and he was given a lot of leeway to do what he wanted. And I think that that's great, and I think that that really shows, um, yeah, in these. And I think that that's partly what people connect with too, is that they do stand out, and it's great.
Yeah, so at the end of Guardians 1, it kind of sets up that Guardians 2 is going to be how Peter Quill is discovering who his real father is, and he discovers that like his real father is still out there. He's only half human. He's like otherwise he's like a god or something like that, other half. And so in the second one, they go on an adventure to find Peter Quill's father, and they find Ego, who is played by Kurt Russell, and discover Kurt Russell's relationship with Chris Pratt's late mother, and everything that had to go down with that. And a lot of the movie takes place on this like really interesting planet, and just the atmosphere, and it kind of builds off of what Guardians 1 did. And they introduce a new character, Mantis, played by Palm Clementif. And yeah, she's like doubles with the comic relief, right? She plays off of Dave Bautista's Drax the Destroyer a lot. And they have a great camaraderie together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about Guardians 2. Did you like do you feel like this was the natural next place to go? I mean, obviously James Gunn had envisioned it because he led the breadcrumbs, but
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I thought they were doing Guardians 2, I was like, oh, I don't really care to know Peter Quill's story. Can we do something else? Like, I didn't want to do this like, oh, guy needs to find his father's story. I didn't find that like that's super fascinating. I want to know your viewpoint on that.
I'm so curious as to know. Well, I will definitely tell you, but I'm also curious why that didn't appeal to you. Is it that Peter Quill's not that interesting a character to you?
Maybe. I mean, like, Chris Pratt aside, right? Because like Chris Pratt has a lot of charisma, and like, do I like him as Star-Lord? Yeah, sure. I mean, I like him less as a person these days.
Ditto, hard ditto.
But yeah, you know he was cast for this role, and he kind of fits into it well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, maybe at that point I just didn't want like, oh, you gotta like find a family. Maybe I wanted some kind of other adventure.
Mm-hmm. No, that's totally fair. And yeah, I kind of felt that way watching this the first time. So I definitely agree with what you're saying, like, because I think the other characters are so fascinating too, and I like those actors much more, that I agree with you that I would have liked to have explored those too. But again, I'm going to be a broken record. Going back and rewatching this one after seeing all three, as well as the Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, it gave me a new appreciation for it. And I I originally said, oh, I like this one, but it's kind of a glorified music video because the soundtracks are so excellent. And, yes, I got emotional, as I very easily do when I'm watching films. But I was like, oh, but is it really, are these really amazing as far as how they're crafted? And yeah, going back, I think they are. And I think it makes a lot of sense as to why it did go the direction it did thematically and narratively. And because Peter's always been so fixated on family, and his shame when he didn't take his mother's hand, and the Unreliable Narrator has a really great video on that, and how Peter's shame kind of carries over into his life and into the films. And so it makes sense, but it also, I think Gamora has a really great line when she says to him, he's like, don't you understand? I found my family. And she's like, well, I thought you already had. And so I think that carrying over of the seeds that had been planted in the first film, it makes sense that they would be more explored here too. And how Nebula also says, she's like, you guys are not friends. All you ever do is fight. And Drax is like, you're right. We're not. We're family. And so I think it's a natural progression in many ways. But at the same time, initially, I did and do agree with you that it would have been nice to maybe get someone else's story while still dealing with those themes.
Right, and like there's certainly segments in this one that I really love too. Like, I guess the Ravager funeral at the end of the movie.
Oh my God.
It
Destroyed me.
yeah, it kind of like brings me back to like how they did Spock's funeral in Wrath of Khan. That
Yeah.
same kind of salute, and I really appreciated that moment. And there's some great gags like Mary freaking Poppins, right? So yeah, there's some really fantastic stuff, and obviously what Peter Quill finds throughout the movie is that while he was searching for his father all along, that he didn't realize he had his father figure in Yondu right next to him the whole time. So
Right, right.
um,
And I think what's so sad about that too is that, and really fascinating, is that we get more of Yondu's perspective in that we see him interact with the characters more. And that conversation he has with Rocket is really devastating for both of them, as he's, confronting Rocket about, you put on this facade that you're the biggest and the baddest and the meanest, but really it's because of the hole that's inside of you. And he's like, I know this because I'm the same way. And then, so we see that. And then later in the film, when he sacrifices himself to help Peter, and he's like, that guy may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy. And it really kind of struck me, the tragedy of Yondu's story, because he would always been so hard on Peter and telling him like, oh, well, you're lucky we didn't eat you. And, we just kept you around.
right.
You could, sneak into these small crevices and, steal things for us. But really he was protecting him the whole time. And the fact that he risked Peter hating him for all these years just to keep his cover and just to keep Peter safe, and is like, that's like the ultimate sacrifice as a parent. I'm like, oh my
Right.
God, it's so sad and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I really like two. I kind of thought, like, before I saw three, that I just liked how all the characters came together and learning about them, and maybe one was my favorite. And
Hmm.
um I don't know. I like I said maybe at the beginning, I like all the James Gunn's Guardians films, and maybe that's why it felt a little bit different when the Guardians appeared in the Russo brothers films, which were Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And I guess even during this press run for Guardians Volume 3, James Gunn was kind of like, oh, well, I wouldn't have had the Guardians do some of the things that they did in the Russo's movie. Um, it was just like kind of like seeing his family have to like be underneath different parents, I guess.
Right, right.
Because yeah, a lot. I couldn't like not include them because a lot happens with the Guardians in the Infinity
Oh
War and
yeah.
Endgames movies, and not only do they meet a lot of the other characters, but they lose a member of their family, only for that member to come back in a different fashion. They a lot of people who have watched these movies say that Peter Quill is responsible for the snap, and like his rash behavior um, kind of made it so that Thanos won. So definitely the Guardians play a big way in these movies. I think it's an end game that Rocket and Groot end up going with Thor, and like to build this ultimate weapon. Um, but we haven't talked too much about Groot, right? And he's also kind of like a comic relief character in a way. Um, he famously only says three words, "I am Groot," and those words are supposed to be all his expressions. And Rocket seems to most understand him through their time together, but some of the other characters grow to know him. And after the first movie, he gets like destroyed, I guess, by Ronan or something like that, and he gets reborn from the remaining twig, and we see him grow throughout the Guardians movies.
Hmm.
Um, do you like the character of Groot? Do you only see him
Oh,
as
of course.
comic relief, or do you
Oh
like
no.
no?
No, I don't see him as just as comic relief, and I adore Groot. I love baby Groot. I love teen Groot. I love adult Groot. I mean, the fact that Groot sacrifices himself to protect his friends, his family, is so sad, so heartbreaking. And then I love Vin Diesel, and I love that Vin Diesel is giving it his all, even though he's just saying one sentence over and over. Although there are variations sometimes, but in a couple of very distinct cases. But he's essentially just saying one sentence, but he puts a lot of different emotion into that, and I think that he's always giving it his all, and I love that. And I think that when you watch Groot, even though he's silent in a lot of the scenes, it's very it's very clear that he's incredibly empathetic because he's often holding or putting his hand on someone when they're angry or they're upset, and he's trying to soothe them. And I think that that just shows what a huge heart he has. So even though he is very much comic relief, especially his banter, or rather Rocket's one-sided banter with him, I think those quieter moments where maybe he's in the background or whatnot, I think really indicate the kind of character that he is, and I really love that. And baby Groot is just so cute.
Yeah, I remember if you've seen any Marvel movies, you'll know that these movies are pretty famous for having their mid credits and then end credits sequences, and Baby Groot was actually introduced like at the end of Guardians 1 in a mid credit sequence and instantly became a favorite of everybody. I mean, there was Baby Groot toys even from that like
Yes.
quick few second appearance. But yeah, do you feel like the Guardians appearances in the Russo brothers films, do they feel different, or do you think that the Russos captured like the spirit of their appearances in the gun films?
So I think it's both. I mean, it's kind of interesting because a lot of time has passed from the second film to when we see them in Infinity War. And so they feel different. And I think part of it is because it's the Russo brothers rather than James Gunn. But also, I'm like, well, but these characters have developed and they have a different rapport and different connection with each other. Like, for instance, Gamora and Peter have a more romantic connection, and it's kind of more intimate, but also the stakes are higher and they've known each other longer. So it's tough to say whether it's different, because of the Russo brothers or because, well, this is just the natural progression of their character arcs. So I do think it is both. But yeah, but the one thing, and I mean, they do sometimes separate, but it was, I don't know, it kind of made me sad to see them split up so soon in Infinity War, and I would have liked to have seen them together a bit more. But
You mean together like as the Guardians?
yes, but like as soon as they come into the film, Rocket and Groot go off with Thor and go to the Forge, so Thor can get his master weapon reconstructed, and then Peter and Gamora and Drax go off with Mantis, but then they're separated. So yeah, so it's just they're all kind of splintered.
Yeah, and that is something that those movies really had a challenge of, right? Because
Right, totally.
they had to tell so many different characters, and some characters were never going to interact with others, just based on time constraints and um, just narratively. But yeah, I think that their appearances in those movies were pretty successful, and we saw them again briefly. I think in one of the Thor movies, because or maybe it was after. Maybe it was after Endgame when they all go off together. Yeah. And then some people thought like maybe the Guardians would appear in the next Thor movie, which they only appear briefly at the beginning, so I didn't even include that on the outline. And I guess like Peter Quill and Thor exchange words before Thor goes on his next adventure. But yeah, the next one James Gunn would do is it's funny because it almost ends up like being a prequel for Volume 3, where it was like, oh, remember these characters, and let me get you back into this world, but have like a really funny story to do it too. We're gonna
Hmm.
include um Kevin Bacon, like actual Kevin Bacon playing himself. And but they do like I said, they almost service the story of Volume 3 because they like show that they are on this celestial head now known as Nowhere, that the Collector used to have, and that's like the home base of the Guardians now. And it's not just the Guardians living there, it's like a whole civilization. And they've also come into contact with another future character in Volume 3, which would be Cosmo the Space Dog.
Yep.
And she's a talking dog, and she has telekinesis. And so those two characters come into it, and so you hadn't seen the holiday special before recently, right? Before Volume 3?
Right. I saw Volume 3 first, and then I
Yeah.
saw the holiday special.
Right. So it was because for me too, I was like, I didn't even remember Cosmo like in the holiday special, so I was like, oh, when did she like come to the crew? Because she's just there in Volume 3.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like which I just assumed that I'm like, oh, okay, they're just coming in, assuming like this is the establishment, like, or this is the establishing scene, like, kind of like we're just resuming. But no, apparently, yeah, you see that she joins the crew in the holiday special. Although we do see her briefly in the first one because she's in the collector's
Right. Yeah.
menagerie.
Yes, and Howard the Duck too, famously.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, mostly that story is just like kind of like cute confection, right? It's like trying to make like Peter feel better
Hmm.
about Christmas because I guess like Yondu famously made Christmas difficult for Peter, and
Yes.
so like Mantis kind of wants to make it up to him by having like the best Christmas ever, and it's revealed like at the end of the special that like Mantis is like his half sister because like she was also like one of Ego's children,
Hmm.
and so like oh they're brother and sister, yay. But yeah, I mean, as a whole, do I think the holiday movie is good? Yeah, it's pretty decent. If you like the Guardians, it's another 40 minutes with them.
That is true.
Um,
And it's a callback because he talked about Footloose. Peter talked about Footloose and his love of it.
right, and it's funny too, like because like a lot of the trades like thought that the Guardians one was trying to do like Star Wars, so maybe like this is like them trying to do like a Star Wars holiday special.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is totally the vibe I got. But I will say, I very much, especially in Volume 2, get Star Wars vibes. Like the way they banter with each other, the way they fight. The very end, when they're watching the Ravager funeral for Yondu, and the cameras behind them, it's almost like an exact replica of, it's evocative of The Empire Strikes Back, the way that ends. So I think it's very intentional.
Yeah. But yeah, without talking too much about the holiday special, and since we're running long, let's get to the volume 3, which is the newest film, just opened in theaters. I had a chance to catch up with it. I know you said that you watched it. Did you talked about on Spoilerpiece?
We did, yes.
Yeah. So this one turns the focus really to Rocket, where as the movie begins, they're all on nowhere, and they're attacked by Adam Warlock, who is part of this group known as the Sovereign. We see them a little bit in Volume 2. They're led by Elizabeth Debicki's character, and there's like the big um, chamber that like they're kind of like growing Adam Warlock in. That's featured at the end of Volume 2. So he's hinted at. He's played by Will Poulter, and he comes down there and wreaks havoc and messes everybody up a little bit, and especially Rocket Raccoon. He is near death, and they're trying to operate on him to fix him when they discover that he has a lock mechanicism on him. So if you try to open him up, his heart will explode. So that's no good. They need to find out the unlock code in order to medically help him. And so they go on their new adventure, which will take them, not only to new places, but into Rocket's past and like really how Rocket got into that situation of having this like robotic lock on his heart and all these different changes to his body. Uh, and I had read Megan before I saw the movie that like it was a difficult movie to watch for animal lovers,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's like an understatement.
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
this is very difficult to watch. Even though they're like the argument was like, oh yeah, they're CGI, and but
I don't think that's a valid argument, but sure.
yeah, you can definitely see like how much violence and pain that's going on here.
Hmm. Yeah, this was, I mean, right from the opening shot, you see these trembling raccoons who are terrified, and you see this giant hand coming at them. So, yeah, and what I said when in my reaction after seeing this was that I have yet to see, or it's rare to see a mainstream film that tackles animal cruelty and animal exploitation, a mainstream film tackle it in such a really sensitive way, but it is gutting. This is a heartbreaking, devastating film. And I sobbed uncontrollably throughout the entire film. Like I would kind of like it would kind of slow down a little bit and then it would ramp up again because something awful would happen. And so this is an extremely difficult film to watch because you're dealing with tons of animal testing, tons of animal cruelty, but also this is a film that's dealing with a ton of trauma, and that's really emotional and jarring to see as well. So all of it is just it's an extremely difficult watch. I think it's a very rewarding one if you can do it, but it's really really hard.
Yeah, and it ends up being that like there's the Peter Quill Gamora stuff that ends up happening in this movie definitely plays second fiddle to Rocket. Um, but it's funny, like some of that it's it can almost be considered that could be the comic relief because of how dark some of the other stuff is.
Mm-hmm. No,
Um,
totally. But even their storyline is really sad too. The fact that Peter is dealing, with this grief that their relationship is completely different now, and his separation from Gamora. Like so you're absolutely right. They definitely are much more comic relief considering Rocket's storyline and that we see his backstory, but there's still such a tinge of bittersweetness to their dynamic as well. So
Yeah, there was certainly that one section where they're trying to uh kind of sneak into the facility where we would have the password for Rocket's lock, and Peter's trying to have a private conversation with Gamora, and the key codes on their message bracelets aren't really lined up appropriately, and he ends up sharing his feelings with everybody. Um,
yes. Oops.
yeah. Um, but yeah, notably, uh, Nebula, Karen Gillian's character, is much more of a player in this film. She has fully gone over to the good guys, if you will,
Hmm.
by this time in the franchise, and has, I'd hate to say taken Gamora's spot, but in a way, um, that's what she's done on the Guardians team. Um, and it's kind of like even like kind of played for laughs at some points, like, oh, maybe Peter Quill would go for Nebula now that like Gamora isn't really a option. And you know what? Kudos. I don't give a lot of kudos to Marvel, but kudos for them to not just like make a simple like, oh, Gamora's gonna get her memories back and like they're gonna be a happy ending ever
Right,
after.
right.
That could have been so easy to do.
Oh, totally. No, I know there was a part of me that I was like, I want you to remember, I want you to remember. But actually, this felt, and I say that it feels more realistic, which is weird when you have a talking tree and a talking, genetically engineered raccoon. But yeah, but that feels more emotionally real. The fact that no, that isn't what happens, but she does come to understand and appreciate, you know, Peter and all of the other guardians and kind of what they had. And yeah, oh, it's so gutting. Anyway, I love it, but I love it that it's more bittersweet and feels more realistic that way.
Right, and like I guess so when James Gunn was thinking about this movie, he likes to use a lot of people that he's worked with before, understandably. I mean, a lot of directors are that way because they know what they're getting.
Hmm.
And he took a an actor from the Peacemaker series with the John Cena HBO Max series, and the actor's known as Chukwudi Iwuji, and he's just such an incredible actor.
Oh yeah.
He plays the High Evolutionary in this, the main villain, and
The scariest villain ever.
yes, he is so menacing, right? It's just like
Yes.
he has this aura about him that like maybe like like they've had many villains in Marvel movies, but like he just has this, even though like there's times where you see him like very fragile, but like still he's like this like really overpowering force.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I would think, and others may think this too, you'd think like Thanos would be maybe the scariest because, he wiped out half the population and, he's like was the big bad for many of the movies. And yeah, and like his specter kind of loomed even before you see him. But yeah, no, I would say the High Evolutionary is the most terrifying.
Right, and like we've talked very much about like how scary this movie can be and how
Yes.
dark, and it's still PG-13. It still has the Disney Marvel brand on it, and the only thing that like really came close to in a lot of these movies to like getting me to feel this way as of late was like at the beginning of Black Widow. I don't know if you remember that, like when they
Oh,
like
I
are
do.
like yeah, or like trafficking the young girls
Hmm.
into like Russia and stuff like that. That was pretty terrifying. I was like, wait, this isn't like a you know these movies are, I guess, for teenagers. Let's put it that way. They're not really for kids, even though a lot of kids see them, and
Right.
they had Guardians of the Galaxy toys at McDonald's. So I don't. As a father, should an 8-year-old see this movie? Probably not. But
This one, the third one, ooh, yeah, that's rough. But I mean, and it's funny that you say that though, because yeah, a lot of kids do see these movies, and part of me is like, well, yeah, I mean, a lot of things are like thinking about when I grew up. I'm like, yeah, there were a lot of dark, kind of ominous, grim films that I watch, but these are really intense. That they're dealing. So many of these films are dealing with genocide and
yeah.
trauma and abuse and these really awful themes. But this one in particular is taking that and like elevating it to another level that is very, very visceral and very hard to watch, but still an incredibly impactful, well told story.
Right, and it's funny in one way. Rocket is the traditional like iced character in this movie. Like, at the very beginning of the movie, his character's kind of sidelined. You don't
Oh,
get
yep, yep.
his famous like banter with the other Guardians, which is like something I really did enjoy about the other movies, because like
Hmm.
he's such a enjoyable character to be around, and in that way you miss some of that while he's away. He's doing his own adventure in his flashbacks.
Totally. But I have to say, I love Bradley Cooper. I think he's a great actor, but his voice acting in this, it's on another level. It's like nothing I've ever seen from him ever. I mean, some of the like guttural crying and screaming he does in this, it's palpable the pain he is experiencing emotionally. And so I definitely miss the banter too, but it makes sense because he is, and James Gunn has said this, that Rocket is the saddest creature in the galaxy, and so he really wanted to cap off this trilogy with his story. And ah, so good, so good.
So I think we're in agreement that like I think like all the James Gunn Guardian movies are good to great. And I at the time, I was probably huge into Infinity War and Endgame, just because like they do so much thematically and tie everything together. It's like it's
Hmm.
hard not to like them. So on a whole, I think that the Guardians movies are pretty darn successful. I think that even it's so hard, right, Megan? It's like some of these franchises or these stories have been changed due to unfortunate circumstances, like specifically like Black Panther, right? Like, oh,
Oh
how
yes.
different would the second movie be in that? So it's hard to like compare some of these stories against each other.
Hmm.
But just taken alone, I guess like the Guardians are one of the more successful trilogies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and however they decide to expand the story, some of that is teased at the end of this one. That they'll maybe go a different way with some other characters. Whether or not that's just a funny tease or if it's actually something that they pursue remains to be seen. Um, but yeah, I like James Gunn's Guardians movies, but it was funny, Megan. One of the things I was thinking about when I left the theater, and like, I don't like, just since I know we wanted to focus on the Guardians, but James Gunn's next movie is going to be a Superman movie,
Hmm.
and that seems like not the same wheelhouse as Guardians. I mean, like they're superhero movies, right? But like, there was a little bit of history we glossed over during the Guardians run where James Gunn was briefly fired from Marvel and Guardians movies, and he took that opportunity to kind of go off and make the Suicide Squad for DC, and he became like DC's friend, and they were like, "Yeah, come run our comic book features here." And but like, as much as I think the Guardians movies are great, I think his his output and his history is like not what I typically associate with Superman,
Hmm.
and maybe that's what they're going for, something different. Because like I always think of like Superman as this like clean, straight laced kind of guy, and like not like the guts and comedy and crass language that like made up the Guardians and Suicide Squad movies.
Yeah, no, totally. And you're right about that. I'm very excited just because I like the Guardians movie so much. And I really surprisingly, like, it was surprising to me how much I liked the Suicide Squad because I hated the first one so much. So the second one was such a delight in comparison. And so I'm very curious to see what else James Gunn is going to do with movies going forward with Superman. But it is interesting because I think of like Man of Steel, which is very divisive because some people love it, some people hate it because it changes Superman in kind of some fundamental core ways. I'm okay with that though. I'm okay with kind of playing with the mythos and seeing what can happen. But I'm also very curious to see what he would do and how he puts his spin on a very seemingly innocent, straight laced character like, Superman.
Like Clark Kent, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, that's for another day. Would you agree with me? How do you see the Guardians movies?
Oh, I love them. I think they're great. Yeah. And it's, like I said, and I keep saying it, but especially going back and rewatching them, I enjoy them. I enjoyed them the first time I watched them, but I enjoyed them even more. So no, I think they're really fantastic, and it's great to kind of see the full story and its emotional conclusion. So I
Well,
agree with you.
Well, I'm glad I that you enjoy these films. I know, like I talked to John sometimes, and like others, he has some Marvel fatigue, and if I mentioned, oh, let's do a Marvel episode, maybe he'd be like, I don't know about that. But I'm glad that you enjoyed revisiting these films, and this wasn't so much homework for you.
Oh God, no! It was an absolute delight because, yeah, I mean, I get what John is saying though, because I mean, some of them, yeah, some of them do kind of bleed into each other, and I wish there was more divergence. And although I think some stand out, like you mentioned Black Widow, and I love Black Widow, and I think that Wakanda Forever, the last 5 minutes of that film are just stunning. So yeah, but no, these were not homework at all. It was an absolute delight to revisit them.
All right, wonderful. So let's go into how you can find us and listen to the show. You have been listening to the It's the Pictures podcast with Max Colville. My Twitter tag is mhcolville. You can search It's the Pictures on Letterboxd. You can find us streaming in places like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. You can find our episodes also streaming on YouTube. So we're a good many places if you want to check us out. Um, and then also we do a newsletter on Substack that I run, mostly bi-weekly. I think I'd say at this point. I mean, sometimes I do weekly, but let's say on the bi-weekly range. And there I do movie reviews and physical media reviews and other great movie topics. Recently, I did top 10 Disney songs on there for people to
Yeah.
check out. And then that's it's the pictures.substack.com. And Megan, can you share again where people can find you?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld. I'm also on Instagram and Letterboxd at The Opinion S. You can find me weekly at Spoilerpiece Theater. The website is spoilerpiece.com. We are at all of the podcast platforms, and you can also find my written reviews at Edge Media Network.
All right, wonderful. Since you are the guest, I want to see we normally do a what you've been watching section where we talk about any TV movies or things that, you're either excited to talk about, or in my case, sometimes I've been asked to review things and have to cover them. But
Mm-hmm.
for you, I'm giving carte blanche if there's any carte blanche. If there's anything in particular you want to talk about or share, please do.
Oh, there's so many good things. Things I'm excited about. I would say the two I'm most excited for that I saw recently, or somewhat recently, were The Starling Girl, which is out in theaters now, and Eliza Scanlon is in it, and it's an excellent drama. And then so far my favorite film of the year just came out, and it's opening in more theaters as we speak. Past Lives, such a great, beautiful film.
Oh yeah, that's right. And yeah, that was the ending film of IFF Boston. I saw that too, and really enjoyed that one. Um, yeah, I've had the experience of watching some movies with businessmen lately, and that seems to be a theme this year. Not only with these two movies, Blackberry and Air, but also Tetris that came out earlier this year. And like,
Hmm.
um, it's a little fad, which I don't mind because I typically enjoyed all three movies. I guess I'll talk about the one that I wasn't asked to review first, which was Air, which is now streaming on Amazon Prime Video. This one is certainly the highest budgeted, maybe, or biggest named actors, certainly of the three. This one has Matt Damon in the lead. Um, Also has Ben Affleck in it and Viola Davis, and it's about the story of how Nike pursued Michael Jordan and ended up creating the Air Jordan line, and kind of making the Nike brand. And even if I mean, I guess 100% of the people watching Air probably know how it ends up, and that Jordan will ultimately sign. I think that it's still pretty fun to watch. I was telling Shannon like why we were watching it, and even afterwards, I thought it was like the dad movie ever made. Because like
Nice.
I was like every like song in this movie is like Dire Straits adjacent because like it starts with like Money for Nothing, uh, and
Ooh,
I'm just
that's a
like,
banger.
yeah, and I'm like these are it's like a fun soundtrack, and I'm like, but like this is for like people who are familiar with like 80s songs, and like I guess like I'm a dad, so maybe that fits for me. I'm like, yeah, sure, this is in my wheelhouse too. I enjoy it. Um, but it has a lot of the same beats, and the real crux of the story, if a villain if you will, is comes from Michael Jordan's agent, and like how he's like, oh yeah, we're gonna sign with these other shoe companies like Converse or Adidas, and we don't even want to meet with Nike because Nike's not known for basketball. And um you know then Matt Damon meets with Jordan's mother, played by Viola Davis, and um, the movie kind of works its way out from there. Jason Bateman's also in this, and he plays like his typical role as like I don't know, like office guy, but like I don't know, I like seeing him in movies. I've always liked him since Arrested Development, so it's nice to see him here too. I don't know. Did you get to watch Air, or did the guys talk about it on the show?
I have not seen Air. This is ridiculous. I can't remember if we covered it or not. No, we didn't. I just realized, no, we did not talk about it. We talked about talking about it, but no, we
Okay.
didn't. But yeah, I've seen Blackberry, but
Oh, all right.
yeah, Glenn Howerton is amazing in that. But yeah, no, not Air. But I'm telling you, I wasn't really like I was going to watch it, but now you've kind of piqued my interest because of Dire Straits in it.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty good soundtrack, and you know, it's funny that I use this term, but like not for nothing, like money for nothing, but yeah, I enjoyed it, and Shannon watched all three of me the business movies, and she liked Air the best, so
Nice.
so that gets her seal of approval. But me, I liked Blackberry the best, and
Oh.
this is of course the story of Research in Motion, the company that many people or kids today probably have no idea about. I remember loving my BlackBerry when I had one and younger.
Did you? I
Yeah,
love that.
and I like in the movie, like famously, it kind of like the movie is in like two parts, right? It's like the rise of BlackBerry and then like the utter destruction of
Yep.
BlackBerry. And like I remember when iPhone was announced, and like I had the same feeling as like the actor in the movie who was like, I need a physical keyboard. I was like, there's no way I'll do a digital keyboard. It won't feel right. And here we all these years later, we all have digital keyboards, and it's fine. But certainly at that point, I thought it was wild, and I don't know. I just really dug this movie. I mean, it's certainly not like you get the rags to riches, sure, but then like you also get the like, oh, this is all you can do, and you're dead in the water now because another company has like come and like just demolished your business. And of course, like underneath that subtext is like this really, this story about friendship and like how these guys build a company together, and they always envision it together, and then like one guy just gets like power hungry and responsibility hungry, and he kind of forgets why they did it in the first place. And it's like that movie that there's this like really like subplot that runs through the whole thing where they're like, oh, if I make electronics, I'm never gonna get them shipped from China. And like like once China gets involved in that story, that it's the beginning of the end. So yeah, I really enjoyed BlackBerry, and that was one that you had an opportunity to see.
I did, yeah. I am in the minority. Everybody loves it. I do not, but I will sing the praise. Like I said, I will sing the praises of Glenn Howerton because I think he gives a stunning performance in it. I think it's excellent.
All right, wonderful. And so yeah, I think that's our episode, Megan. I want to thank you very much for coming on and filling the co-host spot for this episode with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we had a great time and great conversation. Yeah, I'd love to have you on again sometime, and we could talk again. That'd be fun.
I would love that.
All right. Thanks everybody. Take care.